are here for the roundtable, which is called Teaching Economics to High School Students, Curricula, Practices and Competitions. This is the 22nd Academic April International Conference, which is organized by Higher School of Economics and a few more institutions. And this is actually a very important event for myself because people who are here haven't met together for a long time. Because of the events which took place in the 2020, we didn't manage to conduct our International Economics Olympiad, through which most of us know each other in person. So this was an online event, and we meet together online here, but with some hope that sometime after the pandemic will end and we will again see each other in person. So I'm looking forward to it really, and I'm really glad that we are all here for discussing the issues that are of interest for all of us. So there are 7 speakers which represent 7 countries in this roundtable, and the agenda is quite extensive. So we will try to organize it so that everyone has the chance to speak. This roundtable is streamed on YouTube. So if you are watching us on YouTube, feel free to ask questions there or give your comments. We will try to check questions and comments and give responses if the time permits, because we are limited in terms of time anyway. We welcome your questions, so, and hopefully the exchange of ideas will be not only from the speakers but also from the audience. So hopefully there will be some feedback. We are really looking for it. So my colleagues here who will speak or who will moderate the discussion are very prominent people in the field of teaching economics, in the field of organizing events in economics or entrepreneurship or finance, financial literacy education. So let me just briefly introduce them, and I won't mention their honors and their positions. So if they find it relevant, they will mention it themselves about them when they speak. But anyway, we have representatives, as I said, from 7 countries, and let me introduce my colleagues without any particular order. And I really welcome here Martin Stanusevic from the University of Latvia. Latvia organizes the next International Economics Olympiad in 2021. Unfortunately, also online, but I believe that the level of organization will be nonetheless very high. Umberto Gallador, the chairman of the jury of the first 2 IOs and the professor of economics and in the University Pompeu Fabra in Barcelona, and also an enthusiast of new ways of teaching economics, about which I think he will tell us. Danielle Lavoros, as the founder of Brazilian Economics Olympiad. Now he represents the Ministry of Science, Technology and Innovation of Brazil, and he's also one of the fathers of many other Olympiads which take place in Brazil. So it's interesting to look into the experience of this country. I'm mentioning you from the left to the right of my screen, so no particular order. And next is Wendy Carlin, professor of University College London, and one of the key people behind the CORE project. The CORE, I think, is one of the most significant things which happened to economics education around the world within the last decade, and Wendy is one of the main drivers of the projects, and I think we will discuss it today. CORE, the economy by CORE, is the main resource which is recommended to participants of the International Economics Olympiad. So that's why it is very interesting to hear from Wendy about her experience in teaching economics, especially in this turbulent times. I also welcome Thomas Schneider from Switzerland. He's one of the organizers of the Swiss Economics Olympiad, who represents Young Enterprise Switzerland, and their experience in organizing events which are very practical oriented is very interesting and very important to us. And also Similar things can be said about Johannes Linder, who represents Austria and also is engaged in organizing events for high school students, which are connected to the topics that we are discussing today. And my colleague Alexander Zhitkovsky, who's the co-moderator of this talk. Alexander is the executive director and the secretary of the International Economics Olympiad. So this is a very prominent panel, and I wish we had more time to discuss the things that we are going to discuss, but hopefully this is not the last time. This is not the last time we meet. So let's leave maybe some questions open today and see whether we can organize some further events. Maybe this whole thing discussing how to teach economics to a very young audience. This will be kicked off with this meeting, and hopefully people from other countries will join us. Because when I was thinking about how to organize this roundtable, I had a temptation to invite many more people from other countries which participate in IO or don't participate in the IO yet, but still are engaged in efforts in promoting and promoting economic education in high school and making it more official, making it more widespread in their countries. But for the kickoff, I think this panel is extraordinary, so I won't waste any more time for the introductory words. We have some agenda. I'm not sure yet whether we will strictly follow the agenda because this is a conversation which is devoted to things which we are very passionate about. So let's see how it goes. And the first question and the opening question of this talk is about the economics education, and not only economics, but also finance and entrepreneurship education to high school. Why are we doing this? All of us are and I forgot to introduce myself, by the way. My name is Danielle Lavoros. I'm the president of the International Economics Olympiad and deputy vice rector of HEC University, which organizes this conference. So in HEC University, I'm responsible for the Olympiads, for the intellectual competitions for high school students, and that's why I will ask all the questions that I'm going to ask today. And the first question of this agenda is about the reasons why we do what we do, because there is a debate. I don't think that people who are here on this panel will disagree with me, but there are people who disagree with the point that I'm going to make right away. And the point that I'm going to make right away is that we should start teaching economics before university. That even though this is very controversial, it's a very controversial subject, and it has a lot to do with politics, it has a lot to do with society, and it has a lot to do with questions over which experts fight with one another. But still, it is a science, and it is a science which has its laws, which has its foundations, which has its grounds, and this science, knowing this science, really helps in life, also to those who don't devote their life to economics. So some people disagree with that. Some people say that perhaps the high school students who are 15 to 17 years old are just too young to develop thorough and complete understanding of the things that economics is about. But I think that my personal opinion is that putting our effort into organizing the curriculum in some way which can create balanced understanding, that these efforts can lead to very useful experience to the kids, to high school students. So we have speakers, we have leading speakers for every question of the agenda, and this doesn't mean that only the leading speakers speak. Hopefully all of us will contribute to all the questions as far as the time permits. But our leading speakers for the first question about what are the goals of teaching economics and why we do what we do are Johannes and Umberto. So without any particular order, I again welcome you in this roundtable, and please share your thoughts on that. And I also invite everyone else to comment after the speech of the leading speakers. And also we are following the chat in YouTube, so feel free to ask your questions if you have any. Please.
Yeah, maybe I'm starting. Is this fine?
Yeah, please.
Yeah, my ladies and gentlemen, maybe I would like to stress three perspectives about this question: why we are doing this, how we are doing it, and in which context can we see this. And I would like to speak first about why we are doing this, because everybody who is soluting a problem by learning something should get this answer. The parents should understand why this is an important thing. And I think it's important to understand what is the objective when we are doing this. And there is a mix of objectives. When we are learning economics, this has something to do with attitudes. It has a lot to do with basic knowledge. It has a lot to do with how I'm participating in a society, the co-design skills as a citizen. And maybe for some of the students, it has also something to do with TVET knowledge. How can I use this in a practical context when I'm working in a company? Therefore, it is important to see from where we take what we are training and learning in economics. And we have three aspects where we are taking these things. The first one is we are living in an economy of this economy in our society. The second perspective is the discipline of economics, which we know it's not just a single one. There are diverse different disciplines inside the economics. And then we have a third aspect, it's the value dimension. Therefore, first, why we are doing this. Second, what are the relationship with the context, what we can use in the syllabus. And the third one is, how can we do this? There are some organizational aspects important, and therefore we find transversal dimensions approaches. We find hybrid subjects where we have a mix of different elements in one subject, and we find single subjects which are particular with a particular impact and a core aspect of economics, business, entrepreneurship, oriented to general education and vocational education. Therefore, for the starting point of this discussion, I see 3 points. First, why we are doing this. The second one is in which content do we take, and we have 3 different aspects where we are taking this out. And then the third aspect is the dimension, how we can organize this inside the high school. May I give the word to the other colleague?
Okay, so first of all, let me thank Danielle and the organization for inviting me to this very interesting panel. I think when we talk from the perspective of high school, I think there are usually 2 arguments in favor of using or have been used in order to justify the teaching economics at this age. So one, it's the idea that it's a preparatory or training for people who want to follow economics at the university. The second one, it's the idea that everybody, whether you do economics or not, you need to be literate in economics and finance, because you live in a society where economics plays a main role. And you need to understand the world you live in, and in particular, we need to provide students the tools to avoid being manipulated. And I think the second part, and even though I put the order first university, second this training, the second argument is the one that I'm convinced is important, and that's where the teaching of economics in higher school should be focused. From the perspective of a university professor, I don't have any evidence that the students who have learned economics prior to coming to the university perform much better than those who have not. I personally, from this perspective, I think they should devote this time to learning better math, right? So, or better statistics than really economics. So if we think about economics as economic and finance literacy, and then entrepreneurship, I think that should be the focus of high school. And then one last line is that probably we have, and I think this international panel is also a good example. It's that probably there is not one formula that fits all. So we have very different educational systems. We have places where we have open curricula at the university, where this possibility of exploring economics it's offered from once you enter the university. We have programs like it's the case of Spanish education program, or most of the continental Europe, where you are specialized from the very beginning. And then the idea of knowing a little bit what is economics maybe may have some justification there in high school. But I don't want to extend further. Just so these are my main points.
So, Umberto, you pointed out that maybe high school curriculum should focus on financial literacy or entrepreneurship, well, along with economics. But perhaps you can name one or two economics concepts from the economic theory concepts that you think every person should know by they finish high school, or comparative advantage, the importance of international trade, something like this. So in Russia, for example, that's my question now. I will explain why I'm asking this. So in Russia, for example, we have the economics curriculum, and in some schools it is taught as a mandatory subject. We will talk about this a little later, but the textbooks are quite extensive. Some of them have ISLM, for example. Some of them have oligopoly models with calculus. So things like that. But I think that if we are looking for some practically oriented course, what concepts in the economics itself can we focus on? Mainly this is a question to Umberto, but I invite everyone else also to express their ideas.
So yes, very quickly. So I would say, so first they should know what inflation means. It should know what unemployment means, and how are the different ways of measuring. They should know how to read a graph properly, and what's the importance of units. And then I think it's important that they understand the two main concepts. I think, for me, the two great contributions, and that's the way I like to start usually my courses at the university. The two great contributions of economics is that incentives matter, and so one is that incentives matter, and the second one is that information is important. Okay, so those are basic concepts that I think we have to do. But this idea of unemployment, in particular, how to read information is very important.
Yeah, so this is about avoiding being manipulated. So when some journalists write something about things like unemployment and inflation, or some politicians tell something, it's important that you are protected from at least simple and direct manipulation with this information. So any other comments on this, perhaps, before we move on? Martins, please.
Yes, if I would build on top of what Umberto said, I would say that economics should be also an important part in schools, also to train the young kids to be smart decision makers as consumers and as employees and possible employers, even if they don't plan on pursuing an academic career in economics. So I say it would be also impossible for training their skills to interact with their future world environment, as by making right choices that are based on economic knowledge.
Yeah, so this is again about the curriculum being practically oriented, and I cannot agree more with this. So, any other comments, colleagues, about this? Yeah, Danielle?
Hi, everybody. Thank you very much for this invitation. I am an outsider here. I'm an engineer, but I believe, I'm aiming the first question of Daniel, why we are doing this. And this reminds me the speech of President Kennedy. We are doing this not because it's easy, but because it's hard, aiming to go to the moon. And I believe when we focus on teach economics for young people, young students, we are focusing in another treasure. This target is to provoke the base of the system, and we are in a poor reality here in Brazil. So when we start this Olympiad, we are not just aiming to have these students that will study economics and participate in high-level Olympiads. What we want is to save the souls of the base and touch everybody in the base of the system. And economy is a beautiful science. It involves other subjects, history, math, geography. So it's very beautiful. So what we try to do here in the first phase, we have a phase competition here in Brazil. In the first phase, we are worried not to detect these talents, but we are fully committed to touch their souls, to save them. And then if we have a lot of students with more motivation, if they believe in what they can do, for sure, this will push the country to have more study in economics. And this discussion about have economy in high school here in Brazil is very difficult because we are in a poor level in math. So there is a basic problem, and I believe we can touch this because we aim high. So let's try to teach economy. I believe you can learn this. And this is very beautiful, and that's the why we are investing in this.
Yeah. So, Wendy, you have anything to add here?
Yeah, the discussion was starting at 15 to 17-year-olds. I think it should be starting in a much lower down the schools. I think economics is about understanding how the world works and how it came to look the way it does today. And these are questions that fascinate very young children, and we can tempt them into understanding economics, into thinking that this is something for them, because it gives them a lens on understanding that big question: how does the world work, and how can we contribute to making it work better? And that's also something that animates children from an even younger age than age 15. So it's not just about how I can make better decisions for myself, but how we can make the world work better. And that's in my view, a really central contribution that a focus on economics education can make.
Yeah, thank you for the statement. Actually, this is something I wanted to ask you in moving to the second part of our agenda, to the second point about teaching economics in this turbulent times of COVID-19. And Wendy is one of the leading speakers, the other one is Thomas. But my question specifically is first to Wendy, but then to Thomas. Because Wendy, a year ago, you wrote an opinion for Financial Times when the coronavirus was just starting, and I bumped into it and I found it very similar to what I think. And the idea there, it was 1 year ago, before we knew the scale of all this. A year ago, you wrote that perhaps the whole coronavirus thing will make us stop shying away from talking about ethical considerations. From we should bring more moral issues into our conversations. So as economists, we have some mission. I'm retelling with my own words, but perhaps this is roughly what you were saying there, that we are responsible for important conversations, even if they are unpleasant conversations. And our next question is how COVID-19 changed our views on teaching economics. And here, perhaps it would be nice to talk not only about teaching economics to high school students specifically, but the view on the economics education, economics instruction in general. So what this year, this very outstanding year 2020 taught us about how to deliver the economics course. So Wendy and Thomas, without again any particular time spans, please elaborate on this question.
Okay, maybe I'll start just because it leads on from what you were saying, and Thomas and I spoke briefly at the beginning about the focus that we were going to take, and I was going to talk about content, and that connects very closely with what you've just said, Danielle. So let me just I just had a couple of slides that I thought might help focus our attention. So let me try and share the screen. Okay, so yeah, this is the question. How has COVID-19 changed our views on teaching economics? So, you know, you can ask this question and find out. At least you can get it out of the mouths of students. These are university students, but I would really be fascinated for people involved in the Olympiad to collect data on this from high school students as well. So this is, as it says here, about 3,500 students from 10 countries in 2020. What's the most pressing issue that economists should address? So you've all kind of got it in your heads, I guess, what you think they'll say. And this is what they did say. So they were concerned with COVID-19 recession, you can see. Inequality remained the most pressing concern. And this has been the case ever since we started asking this question in about 2015. And you can also see that the climate crisis is there as well. So for some people, they may find these topics somehow weird. You know, why aren't they obsessed about, as you began with, inflation? Well, partly because there isn't any at the moment, but you can see that unemployment is there. So I think this is a really interesting starting point to find out what the audience, whether it's high school students or university students, what they think economists should be working on. So the core project that Daniel mentioned, I'm not going to go on about it, but just say that it is being used in hundreds of schools as well as in universities. And the connection with how we teach post-COVID really comes in this first bullet point, which is trying to bring a new benchmark model to students, what we can think of as the new economics. And I'm just going to give you a few examples to try and make that concrete rather than just theoretical. So this is all about core stuff being free. That's fine. Right. So this is a comparison of the conventional benchmark with a new benchmark. And so the traditional way economics has been taught is in terms of Homo economicus, this far-sighted, self-interested being. And we now are subjecting the conventional benchmark and the new benchmark to the COVID test. We say, you know, is it enough just to think about Homo economicus when we try and understand the behaviors that we've experienced during the pandemic? And that was what Danielle was partly referring to. We've seen lots of other regarding behavior, altruistic behavior, but we've also seen a lot of us versus them thinking. So just think about attitudes to mask wearing. Sometimes it's a sign of exclusion. Don't come in here if you are wearing a mask. Elsewhere, it's a social norm. It's become a norm to wear a mask. So we can go through lots of aspects of economics and kind of subject them to the COVID test. We've had all kinds of interactions through non-market interactions, right? The disease transmission process. We've seen the role of informal rules and informal responses to the pandemic. So we know that lots of behavioral changes occurred before they were mandated by governments, and we need a way of capturing that in our thinking about the economy. So just another couple. We have to go beyond market power and government power if we're going to think about power within firms. And there's been a lot of episodes during the pandemic where workers have been forced to go to work, even when it's been dangerous in terms of exposure to the virus. So I hope this gives a hint that we can really kind of animate economics and use it to illuminate what's gone on in the pandemic. And just to kind of put it in terms of the exam, this was 2019, and this was the subject of the exam. And then you have to skip across 2020 because the exams were cancelled, like the Olympiad. And then this is the exam in 2021. And it's the aspects of the new way of thinking about economics that I think have really stood up to the COVID test. So I hope that kind of sparks off some thinking about how teaching in COVID times has prompted us, who are kind of on the front lines, to deploy our tools to provide insight into the pandemic and the variation in responses across countries as well. So I'll stop there.
Thank you, Wendy. Thomas?
Yeah, thank you very much. So I would like to give an overview of the method, because I think that's the really important aspect of teaching during the COVID time. And I think we had all a big change from front of class teaching to distance learning. And some countries, some schools were well prepared, some others were less prepared. And I think we have seen the importance of blended learning, definitely. So we have seen that we don't need to teach everything in front of the class. We have seen that we have a limited time to teach everything. For example, in Switzerland, we had big trouble to teach everything what we wanted to teach in the curriculum. And then we also had to cancel some exams, what is usually a big motivation for the students. So there we had a big challenge from this change. And I think we should not go back to the classical teaching, but also learn from the distance learning. We should take the key takeaways that we actually can be more dynamic, more flexible within teaching. For example, the entire structure of lessons. I'm sure all countries have the structure of 45 minutes or 60 minutes lessons. And we just have seen during the COVID time that we cannot deliver the learning packages within 45 minutes, but within projects, within longer weeks, and maybe also interdisciplinary methods. So I just think we need to go away from the linear perspective, from very non-dynamic perspectives to a dynamic perspective of the learning process. So more blended learning, breaking out from the classroom, not only having the experience within the classroom, and also breaking out of the classical structure of lessons.
Well, in Switzerland, have any steps been taken to actually implement things like that after the pandemic ends? Or is it just your wishes about how things should work? Is it a real perspective?
I am afraid that many schools, they really went back to the classical teaching method. I also have experienced it myself because I was teaching in a high school some weeks ago, and I experienced that the students and also the teachers were really exhausted from last year. So they are just happy that they can do everything like they used to do it. So at the moment, it's really showing, and it's a bit disappointing that they just went back. But there are also teachers, usually young teachers like myself, who are still motivated and still are believing in a big change. I mean, it's a digital change, of course, so we can also teach from a bigger distance. We have seen that it's working. We actually also, this panel is a good example that it's working. And of course, also the structure of lessons. I think that will be, we just need more time to break out from the structure. But I have seen many projects who are breaking out of the structure because you need many weeks, for example, to implement the product concept. For example, if we are in the area of entrepreneurship, and there the teachers are collaborating, they are taking their time together, and they are co-teaching, and it's possible. But at the moment, I think the time is not there to implement all changes. But I'm sure that distance learning will continue. So it's not only within the classroom, but there will be more excursions, more projects, and also more distance learning.
So Thomas mentioned how difficult it was to actually, to make this transition from, even though we understand perfectly that things shouldn't keep going in the way they used to go before the pandemic. It's in the educational system, in any educational system. For the last few years, which I've been doing this international Olympiad, I've learned a lot of educational system around the world, but they're all similar in one respect. That is, they are very hard to change. So I have a question to you all. Maybe some of you have a quick response to that. Are there any resources that we can recommend to school teachers, to school administrators, and to government administrators that they can use to implement new ways of teaching faster? Because without these resources, they're very reluctant to change anything. But if you suggest some assistance, perhaps they will be more eager to do something. So some specific places, specific links they can go to find some new materials to make this transition. Anyone has anything to share immediately? I thought so. So perhaps we should take note about this. And I think on this panel there are people who can think of making something about that. And one of the next points in our talk in our panel is about this resources which help teachers and learners. So I won't go ahead too fast now. Alexander, I think you should introduce the next topic in our agenda.
Thank you, Danielle. The economics theory and practice states that markets gains from competition, as any learning does too. So, well, as Wendy said, we are producing some external effects and impact. We are creating it through the International Economics Olympiad and through the National Economics Olympiads that are part of this IO part that we do. And we are connected to many national Olympiads, and we have some outstanding, strong national competition organizers here with us today from Brazil and Russia. And I would like to ask, please tell us more how to conduct a new national Olympiad without further ado.
So thank you, Alexander. It's me and Danielle, two people with similar names who are responsible for this part of our conversation. But the reason is not that we have similar names, but that we are responsible for many for many competitions, for many projects, for promoting science among high schoolers. And I will say a few words about what's happening in Russia. Perhaps Danielle will continue about Brazil or some general thoughts. So yeah, Alexander correctly points out that there is a very fundamental thing in economics, that competition helps. But in any economics textbook, in any microeconomics textbook, or the classical ones, we find that competition is a good thing only under some premises. That is, if some conditions are fulfilled, then competition is a good thing. If this otherwise, perhaps we need to interact with the market. We need to introduce some regulation in order to make things even better. So, in my personal view, as a person who organizes a lot of Olympiads, not only IO, but also many things in Russia, in economics and other subjects, I should say that any competition, any Olympiad, should not be limited to the competition itself, because it is not a race where you devote your life to training and then in the end you arrive the first, and that this is your ultimate goal, which is met. To be the first. Well, to be the first is a good thing. People who've been there, who won the gold medals of IO or whatever other competitions there are, they, as far as I can tell from talking to them, they were happy about that. But most of the participants of the competitions, they don't win medals, and still they participate. Even those of them who know in advance that they are very unlikely to become the top one winner, still they participate, and they are encouraged by their teachers, by their educators, by their parents to participate in the competitions. And I think that we should make competitions in such a way that they are fun to participate by themselves. And it's not only about learn as many formula as you can, or as many numbers as you can, and then apply them, list them when you are at the competition. Whoever remembers the most number of formula, this person becomes the winner, and we congratulate him. It shouldn't work this way, and that's why the events which we organize here in Russia, especially which are not connected to the government. I don't represent the government, unlike Danielle. So I'm engaged in some projects with the government, but I have a lot more freedom in the projects which are not government related. If the team which organizes these new competitions somehow manages to find funding for them, then our opportunities are very wide. So I want to tell you about one new project that we are now organizing, and I think that in a few years this will be this will either replace the Russian National Olympiad in the way which it exists right now, or it will add to Russian National Olympiad in economics. What we are doing now, and what we are planning to launch for Russian students next year, and perhaps then extend to other countries, is the so-called Olympiad in practical economics. This is what most economics competitions around the world, which I'm aware of, are lacking: working with data. And as Umberto mentioned, it is a very important thing to read the graphs, to try to be able to find something on the internet, the data that you need to answer some specific question that you have. We are planning to make this competition, which will consist of multiple stages, and between these stages, we are planning to organize the whole teaching program about working with data for high school. Of course, this is not about let's learn something about linear regression and prove Gauss-Markov theorem. This is not how this should work. Of course, we won't do university level econometrics. But important things about working with data are how to read the graphs, how to build the graphs in such a way that those who you send them can understand what you had in mind. How not to fall into the common traps of working with data, like causal relationship versus correlation. How can you tell? How can you test the hypothesis that whatever you find in the data is not a mere random correlation, that there is something behind it. And how to think of alternative hypotheses, which can explain, even if you're attempting to put forward some hypothesis that seems very likely to you, how not to fall into this trap, how not to analyze counterfactuals, how to analyze different explanations of the phenomena we have in mind. So this is a very ambitious project. But perhaps it's the first time I announce it outside my little team, which are now projecting it. But we really are looking forward to change the way economics competitions are organized in Russia. Because working with data, thinking about data, collecting data, doing some calculations, of course, not the university level econometrics and not like big data analysis. This is all very important also, but we want to make students, high school students, think that they shouldn't be scared of numbers. When you see numbers somewhere, you see a spreadsheet, when some politician who's throwing, some journalist who's throwing a lot of numbers on you, well, you shouldn't be disarmed, because there are a lot of instruments which can be used without any econometrics training, but still available to high school students and useful to understand basic concepts of working with data. So that's the aim that we have, and this is very unlike the usual competitions that we have in Russia, and looking forward to introducing it next year. Hopefully this will work. But the general idea, and I actually arrived at this thinking after talking with many people at the IO and the economics instruction community around the world, it's that we actually have this problem in Russia with economics competition. With our main state-organized Olympiad, we have this problem, that the tasks there have become too mathematized. So when you have to select out of a great number of students, you have to select 100, which will make it to the last stage, and out of them you have to select 5, which will go to the IO. So you have to make tasks complicated, because these students, they are very well prepared for the tasks which are standard and non-complicated. So there is one of the two ways. There are two ways, and you should pick one in doing the task for such Olympiad. Either you make them mathematically complicated, but then it becomes an Olympiad in math, not in economics. And some teachers are even kidding that this is economics Olympiad can be called a Paralympiad in math, which is the joke that I don't like, but which I often hear. The other way is to make questions non-standard, is to make questions different from what everyone is used to. Well, when time goes by, they become standard. But then we should invent something new. So this is, I think, what Olympiad should be about. Not testing the knowledge, not testing exactly how many theorems you've learned, but testing whether you're ready to interact with reality. So that's, I think, is very much in line with all of you said in the beginning. Now I give the floor to Danielle, perhaps, to add something about the situation in Brazil with the Olympiads that he's responsible for.
I will start with an analogy. A question why Brazil can be said, well, somehow the country of soccer. That's because everybody is playing soccer in the streets. Children love to play soccer and not to play badminton. That's why you have a good team for the World Cup in soccer and not in badminton. It's something like a fever. Everybody wants to play soccer. They love to play soccer. They are not competing. This is healthy. It's the same. Our goal is to make the same with education, with studying economics. So we have to propose these beautiful goals of the science of economics to solve the problems of the world, inequality, poverty, etc. In the first round of our Olympiad, in a simple way, in a fascinating way, using beautiful videos, colored images, GIFs, simple questions to make students smile. We are talking about students that they have poor base in math and science, but they can think about the problems of the world, and we can save them. And we have fantastic cases. We can point from other Olympiads, children in the or in poor conditions in our country, and because they started with these competitions, with this Olympiad in a healthy way, they are not competing to be good. They like to play, they like to participate, and then now they have a PhD in some area. So we split our Olympiad in different phases, and in the first round, our objective is to propose tests that are simple, that are very interesting for everybody. We want that even the poor students of the country can, oh, now I can do this. I believe I can go. We are saving them. Then, when we have next steps in the next rounds, we propose questions that are more difficult, more challenging, but the treasure of the system is the base. If you have a strong base, a huge base, then in the top of the pyramid, we will have a team that can participate in the World Cup. This is the goal of every Olympiad I have organized here in Brazil, and it's a treasure. We can say the results are very good because we can save a lot of these students that are nobody believe they can grow, they can go. Nobody. And Olympiads, they have this beautiful this treasure. This is the main objective of the Olympiad here in Brazil, and we are trying to spread the idea of an economics Olympiad. It's difficult because students in the schools, I don't know even math, even history, even geography. How can I manage to participate in an economics Olympiad? And so we have the challenge to have tests that are simple in economics, and to touch the base of the science with these beautiful goals of the science of economics, and this is very interesting.
Thank you, Danielle. I completely agree that Olympiads do bring opportunities and bring some kind of belief that self-development is possible, and that's very common, I think, in all around the world. Yeah, we kind of manage to give something back to those students, and you have mentioned that it would be great if we could also use some interactive, maybe interactive instruction, but some interactive approaches to those students, yeah, to those Olympiads. You both have stated that Olympiads could use some kind of gamification inside those processes, yeah, but we will go on to those themes a little bit later, and by now we would like to talk about the methods of interactive instruction, yeah, because, well, before the COVID, it went very differently. Now we have a lot of internet, we have a lot of communication via Zoom, via something online, and, well, maybe we do lack some person-to-person communication now, but we do have some more possible connections. We do have an ability to talk through to people from all around the world, like we do now, and we can connect those students from farther regions of our countries to give them something new, some new possibilities. And well, during and after the COVID, this will only grow. So what resources could help teachers and learners in nowadays situation and in days to come? Please, Wendy, Hans, Umberto, I'm sorry. Could you please talk more on those themes?
So Wendy, maybe I start and you follow later. So it's I think I'm connected to something that we were talking before. That's what we have learned from COVID. I think we have learned that we have all these opportunities to do classes and interactions and use the technology, not to be present all the time. But I think a valuable lesson is we have learned that that the value of the time that we spend with students in the classroom is huge, and we cannot spend that time lecturing. So we need interaction, and we have to use in a very productive way that time. So I'm gonna focus my intervention in a very specific tool that are experiments. That's something I have been using for many years, and it's experiments for teaching. And because an image it's better than 1,000 words, let me just try to share. So I think you have seen. So this is what it means to run an experiment in the classroom. These are in fact students, high school students, and what they are doing is they are trading in the market. So they are buying and selling units and negotiating and trying to understand what it means to reason in economic terms. So what we have built and what is important about not only experiment but in general these new tools for teaching is the possibility of transforming students from just receivers of information to make them searchers of information, to the idea of experiencing economics, the idea of experiential learning, experiencing economics in order to later on learn and find by themselves what are the main concepts we can do, the main concepts they have to learn. So for that purpose, and let's see. So let me just mention a couple of projects, or in particular a project that I've been. So we are still working on within the core project, and this is what it's called Experiencing Economics. So Experiencing Economics is a book that gives a list of experiments to use in the classroom. Okay, and these experiments you can use them. When I talk the classroom, it means the physical classroom or the virtual classroom. So they can be used both in the so physically in the room, or they can be used online. And the idea with this project is mainly to offer the tools to run these experiments effortless. Right. So from the point of view of in particularly of the instructor. So usually the standard, and I think it might be. So let's see if I can also share. Share this screen. Here it is. So this is the web page where there is this experience in economics. So usually the common arguments against reforms that we were talking before, but against taking new technologies, so changing the way we teach, is this idea of, it's very time consuming, it requires a lot of preparation, it's very costly to adopt this new technology. So this project in particular, what it tries is to facilitate the life of instructors in using experiments. So when you enter Experiencing Economics, there are two parts. So there are instructions for the professors, and there are instructions for the students. So if we go to the students and we see, so there are some experiments, and we think about how we teach, the idea of public good games, and the idea of contributions, and what's the problem when we want to provide a good, that we all are going to share the returns from them. What they have is the instruction of how to participate in these experiments using either using any kind of a personal device. And they can be run using a telephone, using a computer, a laptop, or a tablet. So students take a role in this economic situation, and they have to make decisions. So they have instructions here where that are complemented with both with homework questions and are complemented with further readings on each one of these topics. Now, this is from the point of view of students. Students like the idea of getting involved. They like the idea of participating in the experiments and trying to decipher what's happening or what happened during the experiment. From the perspective of the instructor, what this experience in economics provides, it's all the necessary information in order to run to run these experiments without effort. Okay, and it provides, just to give you an idea, it provides not only the requirements but a step by step guide, and also the necessary hints for running the discussion, homework questions, and further reading. Besides, this is part of the, I should have said probably at the beginning, this is part of the core project. So each one of the experiments is closely connected to the concept in the core, even though they can be run independently. So this is one instrument that I think, and yes, stop sharing. So one instrument that I've used for many years. I have taught it to other instructors. It has been adopted in many other institutions. And in general, I think there are 2 points to highlight here. One is the good experience for the students, but also the good experience for teachers. So we should also think that when we organize a course, and that's many of the why these instruments are useful, we are going to have to teach this course many times. Okay, so if we don't make it fun teaching, then the course is going to be boring. So I think one of the great contributions, or one of the things we should keep in mind when talking about these instruments, is the idea that it has to be fun and interesting to take a course. It has to be fun and interesting to teach a course, because otherwise we go nowhere.
Do you want me to go ahead, or do you want to take I think Johannes had a question. Is that?
Yeah, Johannes, please.
I think it is a discussion, and I would like to stress one point which Karen said in the beginning. When we speak about high school students, we have to see one very important aspect. For many of these students, the economic lesson at school will be the only one they receive. They will not study economics at the university. They will never study economics at the university. Therefore, I think we have to go back to some points that Caroline also mentioned. We need to go back to the basic. And the basic, in my opinion, is how can the economy be organized in the country? And we have to understand it's very dynamic. It has so changed over the time how it was organized. And it's important that we understand this. We have to understand how economic problems could be solved. And as Caroline mentioned, the COVID, the crisis, it's the same with unemployment, with poverty, environment protection. And I think students like to learn how they could be a part of the solution. And therefore, it's so important that we give them the chance that they learn how can we achieve quality of life in combination with prosperity, and how can we participate. And I think economics has to give an answer for that. it's not so important to give a good possibility to understand inflation or data knowledge. It's much more important to understand how we can participate with solutions in the society and how we can participate as an entrepreneur, as a change maker, as a good consumer in the society. Because it is highly connected also with democracy, in my opinion, how we organize our market system. And therefore, it's so important that we do not lose this major important points when we speak about high school students. And I would like to mention one point to Umberto. I love that you are promoting learning by experiments. I like this a lot. We have a game book for learners for the primary school, for lower secondary school, and for upper secondary school, because we see gamification is very important. But it needs to be connected, and I have the feeling that you are doing this with these key questions, with these key aspects that we try that each of the learners take away from the school. That was just something what I was thinking it's important to mention. I had the feeling that maybe we are going a bit too far in some of the discussion points.
Yeah, thank you, Hannes. This really is an important point that you're making, and I think we will return to this a little bit later when we discuss the next question. But now I think Wendy has something to add to Umberto's speech.
Yeah, yeah, just to take up a few other kinds of resources, and that I'm really going back in some sense to what Thomas said right at the beginning, which is, you know, we were like parachuted into a different world when we suddenly had to switch to online, and it completely transformed, at least for some of us, how we taught, taking the teacher away from the front of the classroom, kind of really authentically for the first time. And I absolutely agree that it will be hard to make these lessons stick, and to stop people flipping back to the, you know, the jug and the mug kind of idea of just pouring the knowledge from the front of the classroom into the student's head. So experiencing economics experiments is really crucial. So just let me show a couple more things that might give people some additional ideas. So this is not high school, but it could very well be high school. And this is the idea of thinking about portions of what's being taught in weeks rather than in hour sessions. And as I said, taking the teacher away from the front of the classroom. So the idea is that you just give the students a route map, how they're going to spend their time. Obviously, you'd change this if you were teaching, you know, children lower down, but the principles are the same. You give them a way of working through material. They just click through to the relevant links. Here you can see they have a very tightly connected video, very short 3-minute video. And one of the resources that I think is really fantastic that you can build into this kind of way of teaching is to do the data work. So this is Danielle's point about data. The students here are asked to add a country. So this is this big question of how did the world come to be the way it looks today? So we've got Brazil here. But one thing you might want to, you know, introduce is a new lens. Why don't we just turn it into logs? We can add our country, our favorite country. So we're interested in, say, we know Vietnam's done fantastically well in the pandemic. So let's have a look at how it's where it sits in this chart. We can immediately compare Vietnam, the trajectory, with Brazil, go back to the linear, and so on. So these are just the kind of resources that if the students are online, then it totally opens up the questions we can get them working on for themselves. Video competitions is something we've always done with our students, and that worked in a completely online way this year. So this is a 2 or 3 minute video on answering the question, is Westminster Abbey a firm? Okay, now that's an interesting question. that that you have to connect a location. We give them a GPS location, and they have to link it to this week one of how the world came to look like it does. And Westminster Abbey is kind of a very interesting case that they chose. Understanding and experiencing economics. How do we get students to experience COVID? Okay, so this is the disease transmission of COVID. So people are being quarantined and they're disappearing from their economic interactions. And we can look at the difference that social distancing makes to the epidemic, the path of the epidemic. We can look at the economic cost. We can look at the effect on inequality, which has been a major impact of the pandemic. We can make it much more complicated and run the simulation again and again. Okay, so these are just some tools that are out there in terms of inequality. I've just chosen a set of countries here. We can again add whatever we like, and we can look at inequality across countries, within countries, tip it up, turn it round, introduce ways of measuring inequality, different ways of measuring inequality, and see what's happened since 1980. So this is, there are lots of tools around, and if we want to get students into creating or learning about data on their own, so in a high school competition of the kind that Danielle mentioned, you can do it here, starting with measuring climate change. You have to know no economics. You don't even have to have seen a spreadsheet. You don't have to know any coding, and you can be producing visualizations and forming your own hypotheses, working in a team. So there are tons of resources out there. I think we can be kind of confident that if we can make these things well known, there's been a kind of spurt, I would say, of creativity during COVID times, and we really have to struggle to stop people pushing themselves back into the front of the class and making use of those occasions when you are interacting. They've got to pay. So, for example, you can do polls with your students. You can compare the results of polls with what experts say. Your students will be delighted when they come up with just as good explanations for what's going on in COVID as the so-called experts. So I think there's really fertile ground, but we have to share ideas about how to convince our perhaps less adventurous colleagues and the bureaucratic level that is always putting blockages to these kind of revolutions in teaching.
Yep. Thank you, Wendy. Thank you, Umberto and Johannes, for participating in this part. I think that this thing about experiments is very important for two reasons. First, well, it will be fun for students to learn through experience. That's completely a game changer. Once we have, and COVID taught us that it's possible to teach with all these devices in the students' hands. So it's fine that they have their laptops or iPhones or whatever with them, so we can conduct experiments any moment. And the second point about experiments is that what I personally have found when talking to high schoolers, which I had interactions with during classes, is that it's a new idea for them that economists do experiments. They are in some respect like chemists, like people who do physics. So it's not an armchair profession being an economist. You have to work with some real data, with some real subjects in your experiment. So, and this practical orientation has come up a few times in this conversation. So our next question, and we're running out of time, so I ask the speakers to be concise. Now, next question is about the practical orientation of our teaching and our competition itself, and that is introducing case studies, introducing simulations into this education, and I give the floor to Thomas and Johannes on this subject. So, which of you will start?
Well, yes, if I may, I guess it has to be mentioned that I'm coming from the entrepreneurship side, and we are having a national competition, also international and worldwide competition from Junior Achievement, which is a non-profit organization and active in many different countries over the world. And I think one point what was missing at the beginning is that we should not only prepare the students for the studies, but also for their professional life. And in my opinion, the soft skills, the social skills, and also the self-reflecting skills are getting more and more important. And for that, I think we cannot only teach within the classroom, but we need to give the students the opportunity to have own experiences. And one way to do that is competition. So in Switzerland, for example, they can lead mini enterprises for 1 year. And over this year, they learn how to be in a startup with their ups and downs. Of course, they need to work within a team. And I think that's one of the most important experiences in their high school time, because they get to know how to handle conflicts. They know how to handle brainstorming and idea development. They get to know what it means if they need to talk to strangers, when they need to make marketing and sell a product in front of an audience. And I think these are the skills they really need in every area of a professional life. It doesn't matter if they're going into business or economics, and if they are going to study or not. That's one way to teach, and also to brighten up the opportunities within a school. So in my opinion, also the COVID situation taught us that we don't need to think within the school itself and in the building itself, but learning is everywhere, and learning opportunities should be not only placed within the school.
Yeah, that's hard not to agree with. Well, but again, much harder to implement than to imagine, unfortunately. And I'm really willing to see someday here that the things I do look like what you're telling. That is learning, which happens all the time, and learning which happens for the sake of acquiring some useful skills, not just skills to solve the problems which can be applied elsewhere. So that's actually our ultimate goal. So Johannes, maybe you elaborate a little on your previous statement about the need to make education connected to real questions, to solving the big questions of society, and what interactive ways of teaching do you introduce?
I would like to show that I'm a great fan of challenge-based learning. Do you see a website? That's fine. On this website, you will find it's existing in many different languages. It's in English, in Portuguese, it's in French, in German, in Spanish, and it's for different age groups. It's from primary age up to secondary, high school age. And the major idea is always, how can I bring a context to that, what I'm learning with economic participation? And it is connected with the question that it's not enough only to learn knowledge, it's particularly important also to stress the point of attitude. Because when we want that some people are able to participate in a society and in the economy, we have to understand that the most are not learning this at the family. They are not learning this kind of attitude, how you participate. Therefore, you have to organize some learning arrangements, how you can support this. This is one aspect what I like to show. And there's another one. I have just to go back and bring a new. I think it's important to see when we talk about, do you see a cycle? A red one? It's important to see we have different views for learning arrangements. We have the view, the micro view, what is going on in the school. We want to organize a nice curriculum. Should be organized in beyond the formal curriculum, if it's outside the school. But we have to see all these things is connected with the labor market, with the society. It's connected with a kind of assessment culture which you have in your country. It's connected with the different channels, with the teacher training. Are your teachers highly qualified in the initial teacher training or not so good qualified in the initial training? Then this has a tremendous effect for the whole learning arrangement, what you can support inside the school. How is it with the culture in your country? Because it's really difficult to say these are the resources which you can use in all countries, because the culture is so diverse from country to country, and therefore you need some resources which fits to the culture in your country. And of course, it's a question of the key stakeholder, how you can involve them in your learning arrangement, because it should be not only the teacher who is involved, there should be more people who are involved. For instance, we are supporting at the moment a so-called design week, an entrepreneurship week for high school students, where they work a whole week on solutions for the future. And we see the students just love this arrangement. And they have so many hours in 1 week, like they would have in the 2-hour subject for the whole year. So in 1 week, you see a tremendous effect, but it's still connected with a subject which is going on in the year. Therefore, they go on with that, what they are learning there. And I think it's important to experiment with different arrangements, what you can use. But there's one very, very important thing inside the school students. School students start with 6 and maybe stay up to 15 or 19 inside the school. So we have a long time. And I like a lot what Daniel said about soccer. And I think it's very comparable with that of the opportunities which we have with entrepreneurial mindset, with economic basic knowledge. It need not to be done in 1 year. We have time, and we have a lot of time, in fact. But we need to find out which things are particularly good for very young kids, that they are able to be proactive and try to hold this for a longer time. Because we know that in primary schools, kids so tremendously proactive. And the most of them, in most countries, are total different persons when they are 13, 14, 15. Then we need to find out which activities, particularly connected with economics and entrepreneurship, can we support, that they see this is something what I immediately can use, because I'm living in an economy, I'm living in a society, and I can participate also as a kid, as a youngster in this society, and I'm not learning just for a storage that later on I will use this to change the society. Therefore, I think we need small challenges what kids can salute, and they will later on go with larger one. And I want to bring one picture from sports. In Austria, skiing is much more popular than soccer, and ski jumping is a particular artificial sport. And we have a ski jumper, when he jumped 200 meters, they asked him, was it risky to jump 200 meters? And he gave a brilliant answer for this long-term aspect. He said, it was not risky. It was more risky when I was 3 years and I was only jumping 2 meters, because my attitude was not fit and I didn't know the method, how to jump in a good way. And I think it's so important that we start with small things, although maybe they look unimportant for us, but with the small things, we will reach a lot of students. and they will change their whole life in our society, because when they learn with the small things, then they also can take over the large challenges. And therefore I think competitions are, for me, are festivals where you see a lot of ideas, solutions, how youngsters from other countries have different perspective for this solution, and you want to see it's super that we grow together, because we have to see how solutions from Brasilia are for problems, and how maybe we can take over some of these solutions and mix them up with things from our country, where we see, oh God, we need to be much more dynamic in this area than we were thinking in the past. So I think this international networking is tremendous important for us, that we are open and have a more open mindset for us as a teacher, as a professor at the university, but also for our students. Because I think very often when the students stay only in one country, in one region, they get focused that this is the reality. But this is not reality. That's the reality at the moment in this country. But 100 years before, it was totally different. And in 100 years later, it will be different. But when we take a look to other countries, we see this, we have a window that we see that's different in other countries. And maybe that's the line where we like to go on with our society, with our economy. And maybe that's a wrong line. And we try to protect our society that we are not going in this direction. Therefore, I think learning arrangement, something where we need to have storyteller, passionate people who give people a chance to develop their own mindset and own skills. And therefore, I see the function of teacher has changed. Now we have trainers and mentors. They have to be like in sport, like in soccer. You always have these genius trainers and you have a coach. Therefore, we need the same in many other subjects. And I think also we need to be careful. Modern technology is very often only frontal. It's not participating. It's a new way, but it's still very frontal. It's not participating, and they are not learning how to change their life. They just get some more consumer-oriented things. Sometimes I see this that the modern technology is so cool. But it's not so that they automatically get more participated. Therefore, I think experiments and games are much more effective very often than these modern technology things. Of course, modern technology things have a couple of new opportunities now, and we will also use them. But I think we need to be careful that with modern technology, we are not getting old frontal classes back, which we hope that they are outdated. Thanks a lot.
Well, thank you, Johannes. It was a very inspiring speech and a lot to think about out of what you were mentioning. We have one more question to discuss, but we are running out of time. I think we can spend a few more minutes after the official time ends, if no one is rushing somewhere. So, and this question is very much related to what already has been discussed about should economics enter the official high school curriculum as math, history, and this more conventional subjects. So there are risks there that if we somehow, and we discuss it in Russia a lot, that if we tomorrow the president signs the law that every high school student or every middle or every elementary school student should study economics, this will have more downside effects than upside effects. That's a lot of complications here to be resolved, and perhaps this is not what we are looking for. So what is the optimal way to organize this interaction with the official school system, with the government, with teachers, instructors, and so on? So, and this is where I finally give the floor to Martin. If you like, please elaborate on this question.
Well, hello. Of course, at least in the end. And well, I won't take it long. And one of the things that, of course, Danielle mentioned, and is also part of the topic, is should it be mandatory or elective? And that's also something that's been an issue here in Latvia too, because we are currently in the middle of a rehaul of our education system. At least I personally, I would like to say that economic knowledge should not be a privilege of the few. It should be something that should be available to everybody. And that's why I'm a proponent of economics as being a mandatory part of the school equilibrium. And of course, for example, in our case, we are currently moving to a system in Latvia where economics is being taught from the first grade as a part of social sciences. So currently, our current program covers the whole school process from the first until the last 12th grade, having some kind of economics integrated somewhere. And I think that's a great thing, and that should be done, because even the smallest kids should have some basic knowledge of how this world works, and it works often based on the economics. And I even think that this is a field that should be integrated more, even with biology, with ecology, with math, with geography in our classrooms in all levels. And that everybody should benefit from that. And at least we in my country are moving towards that, because most courses in school are now moved in the direction of joining several topics together, or by creating this move towards not knowledge but competences, as we know often about, and that I think that's a good direction. Of course, what I see as a problem is a balance between some kind of practical skills and academic skills, and that's a hard thing to thread. Because one problem I see, for example, from our experience, is that some schools are becoming very elite in this field. They are monopolizing the economic field, and we see a very dominance of some schools in national Olympiads and so on. Of course, I'm glad for those kids, but at the same time, that discourages other schools. And as a good example that I would like to bring up is what is being done in Latvia, and that's a collaboration with the industry and with partners outside of the education field. For example, a big part of economics curriculum is developed by the help of the Central Bank of Latvia. And what's a better way to create the base for knowledge as expertise of people who are using it in everyday life? And I think that's a concept that should be spread all around the world, where competent experts from the industry are working together with educators to create materials that could be used for everybody, from 7-year-olds up to 18-year-olds and so on. And that's why I think should be the future of more economics teaching through the practical approach. And of course, the academic approach should be something more specific for the universities. And so this collaboration should be a future path for most of us. Of course, what I see as a problem in near future is a risk of losing expert and very energetic teachers of economics. Because I have observed that teaching economics in schools sometimes becomes very automated. Teachers are becoming moderators who are just conveying the material prepared by somebody else. And I am afraid that might risk that very good teachers in economics might lose their field of work, because they will be not required, since automation, I would say, is taking over a bit in this field. And of course, that's an open discussion. What's better? A lot of kids who know basics of economics, or a small share of kids who have great knowledge of economics. And I'm not yet sure where the right path lies. Thank you.
Well, you mentioned this inclusiveness of the Olympiads and of education, and I should mention here that out of the 7 countries which are represented here at the round table, there is one country which is not represented in the IO, and this is the UK. Wendy, we discussed it with Wendy, and a few years ago she introduced me to Andrew Sykes, a teacher of one of the best schools in London, and a really great teacher. I visited his lesson and it was completely outstanding. And I encouraged him many times. I said, Andrew, let's do something in Great Britain. Let's organize some competition so that British boys and girls can participate and then they can represent their country in the IEO. And Andrew keeps telling me that if you organize any competition in the UK, we know in advance who wins, which schools they will be from, which communities they will be from, which backgrounds they will come from, which color of skin, which gender. We know this in advance, and this will only further embrace inequality. That's why this is a tricky question: how we can make this education and competitions inclusive and representative. And Danielle, I think you've done some progress here, and I know that in the Brazilian National Olympiad, very different backgrounds, students from very different backgrounds participate and are successful. So maybe you can say a few words about this question of entering, communicating and cooperating with the official system, because when you started the Brazilian Economics Olympiad, not the Brazilian Olympiads, you, as far as I remember, you were not part of the government. Now you are part of the government, so you can view the problem from the two sides. So maybe you have some useful comments on that.
This is a very complex issue, but we are fully committed to address it. And the focus of our Olympiads is just to touch the souls of this part of the country, the non-privileged students. And what we do, how do we manage to assess them? We try to when we create the tests of an Olympiad, we try to make them smile. The students should smile. We are talking about a student that they don't smile. They hate schools. They hate their teachers. They hate everything. They hate math, they hate geography, they hate history. They even don't know what is economics. How can we manage to create an Olympiad and touch these students? We have created even an open track. Our Olympiad is open for everybody. So students can participate in the Olympiad, and his grandfather can also participate. Not in an official category, but everybody is invited to participate in the Olympiads. The goal is to provide an environment something like a fever. If we live a fever, if we live Olympiads as with the same relationship we have with sports, with soccer, then the success is assured. The question about we have economics as a subject in schools, this is very complex because I believe this is related with qualification of the teachers. This is a huge problem here because basically we have to manage to have a teacher that can explain geometric progressions, and maybe it will be very useful if this teacher can relate the geometric progressions with compound interest. This is a secondary goal. It's impossible in our reality to put economics in the curricula, but we should push the teachers to qualify, to provide their students with this environment, to address the questions of the world, and to know these basic skills are related to the answers for the future of the planet. And this is something beautiful, and the qualification is the problem here. Qualification of the teachers in the first level.
Yeah, thank you, Daniel. That's really a problem everywhere. When I talk to people about the organization of curricula and the relation of the competitions in economics, the national competitions which are used to select teams for the IEO, and the government, the official school system. This is in many cases very complicated, and we have different examples which have their advantages and disadvantages. So we already exceeded the time that were allotted to this roundtable. Maybe we have 5 more minutes. I'm very thankful to generous organizers of the conference who allow us to stay here for a little longer. So if some of the speakers have any concluding remarks, maybe just a few words to reflect on the conversation which just happened, please share them. I will start with myself, and my biggest takeaway from the conversation just took place is that we have scratched the surface of various topics which are relevant to the things which we are doing every day in our profession, and there are a lot of things that we do within our projects, within our communities, but we should share them more. We should talk and communicate and exchange our experience more. And I'm very grateful to all of you for participating here. And I think this is just the beginning. This is just a kickoff of our next discussions. Well, all of you except Wendy are members of the IO International Board, but Wendy, you're also invited to all our discussions in developing the Olympiad. So thank you all for coming. These are my concluding remarks, but if any of you are willing to share yours, please feel free. We have 3 more minutes, so be really concise.
Thank you, everybody.
Danielle.
I've learned a lot. It was very productive, and I would like to know more about the links you have shared. Some strategies you have implemented in your countries. It was very good to participate here. Thank you very much.
Thomas?
Just a few comments. I think about UK. I think it's more important that you participate first, that you develop something first. But I think it's a process that you can be more inclusive. So I would like to motivate to have their Olympiad as well. And we also have a partner organization in the UK if that would help. So we can exchange contacts if you like to. And about the curriculum, I think economics doesn't have to be a curriculum from the first grade. Would be nice. I have heard the best practice from Latvia. That would be great. But I think it's one way of a perspective, and that it can be integrated in any other curriculum, and of course also into projects. So I don't think it's the most important discussion if it has to be a curriculum, but it has to be a part of teaching, a part of the learning process.
Thank you, Thomas. Anyone else? Oh, Johannes?
My conclusion would be every generation has to learn anew how the economy and the society works today and in the future. So it's a very nice thing for us that we have the possibility to work with youngsters with their own potential and talents, how they can use them, that the solutions for the future will be learned today, that we have them in the future. And I think that's a privilege that we can do this. And I think economics and entrepreneurship, therefore, is an important part of that. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Johannes. So, Umberto.
I just want to thank the invitation. So it was a great panel. I think we touched many important issues. And for me, the take I get from this is the importance of considering that rather than talking about the subject of economics and how to introduce the economics into the curricula, we should start talking about economic literacy. And we should have a measure of how literate the society, and that could be a good way to start from this.
Yeah, I agree with that completely. So thank you all. No more concluding remarks. Thank you all for coming. This was a very, for me personally, as I said, this was a very fruitful conversation, and we definitely should continue this. This is a big international conference, so here we are very limited on time and very limited on the things that we can devote time talking about. But after we have kicked off, I'm sure that this conversation will continue, and on the grounds of the IEO and other projects that we mentioned today, I think the great improvements can be built for the international community of economics educators. So thank you all for participating. This was Roundtable about high school economics education, and see you on our next meetings. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.